Hey guys, welcome back to the Creating Gems podcast. I don't even know if this is a podcast, but we're just gonna keep calling it that. So that's like the worst intro ever, but we're actually gonna keep that. But we're kind of just doing, I guess, a little mini series on answering questions that you guys have asked me and just a lot of things that come up quite often in conversation. And so today we're actually going to be talking about this term called fear of man. And so that's a really Christian term. It's basically simplistically put, how do you get people to stop caring? How do you stop caring about what people think about you and just do the stuff? And so there is a very big like spiritual element to this. And I'll be honest with you, I have not been a Christian long enough to really understand it. But it's just something that really gets thrown around a lot, of breaking off the fear of man and the spirit of the fear of man. And like, how do you just go do stuff? And so this is kind of what has happened in my faith journey so far, to break off fear of man. And I just kind of want to preface this by saying I'm not necessarily deeming that I have broken off fear of man. This is something that when people have prayed for me, that's how I started to hear this term more often, is people would pray. And I use this often of, guys, don't hear what I'm not saying. And so I'm not saying that I have like full confidence or that I've got this down pat or whatever, but it's interesting that as people had prayed for me that either didn't know me, or as people have gotten to know me, they keep talking about how you don't have a fear of man. And so that's where I started to pick up on this term and understand what it means a little bit more. And then people ask me often about, how do you not have a fear of man? So again, I am not like a theologian or like trying to be, or like, I don't even know what like the context would be to answer this adequately. I have no idea. I'm just going to give you examples of the things that have happened in my life thus far coming into faith that have stopped me caring about what people think. Coming from someone that we've spoken about this, I think, in my very first podcast about my testimony before OnlyFans agency, of my manifestation of insecurities hasn't necessarily been about people and what they think about me to a degree. It's always been business and money. And it's always been that once I get the business and once I get the money, then I'm there. Therefore, then I matter. And so I don't know if that plays kind of and skews this a little bit, but in business, you have to have a ruthless mentality. And that's not a negative thing. And it doesn't mean that you're mean, and it doesn't mean you're unkind, but it means you're ruthless in the pursuit of moving forward. And so what you have kind of learned when you want to achieve your dreams, and when you want to kind of do things that are outside the sphere of what people deem as normal, you have to stop caring about what they think, because you're never going to achieve your dreams if you're so consumed by what everyone else says. And I remember before Jesus, I was building a medicinal cannabis company. I had a business partner, and there was crazy projections on that business. And it was weird and it was scary. And we were asking for $2 million, and we needed to invest in like a brick and mortar business and have all of these upfront costs. And it was scaring people, because they're like, this is a big responsibility. What if it fails? What if you have debt? What if? And that's where I learned that I had to tune out the noise of other people, because they weren't aligned with the vision of what I wanted for my life. And so coming into faith, I'm actually thinking now, there's like a Christine Kane sermon. I actually might put it in the thing, because at least it gives like biblical context. And she talks about tuning out the frequencies. And she talks about with David and Goliath, that Goliath like was basically like running his mouth. And so the Israelites were scared, even though he hadn't done anything, he was just running his mouth. But when David enters into the picture, he tuned out the frequency of Goliath, because he understood the identity that he had. And so he didn't care. That's why he had the courage to be able to go do what he did. And even his brother came up to him and was like, who do you think you are? But again, he didn't have this fear of people pleasing. He just went and did the thing. And so it's about tuning out frequencies of other people that don't really matter. And again, don't hear what I'm not saying in that. This is in the context of like moving forward, achieving your dreams, going after things. Sometimes we don't need to listen to all people's voices and opinions on these things, and that's okay. And that just comes down to wisdom as you go about those journeys of who do you share things with, and that's just trial and error. But that's another conversation for another day. So a big lens that I had coming in to faith is I understood what it took from a business perspective to achieve my dreams. And I understood that I had to not listen to people's voices to be able to achieve those. And so then when I found Jesus and I started talking about OnlyFans agency, and I started talking about how I was radically healed and all the things in, 5 days and what happened, I didn't care what people thought, because I knew that what I saw at the OnlyFans agency was evil, and I knew that it was hurting people, and I cared more about speaking the truth and being able to help at least one person than I did about all the other voices. And I had such a deep conviction in my heart of everyone deserves to know the truth, to make a well-informed decision. And so it's not about shoving an ideology down people's throats or telling people that they have to do something and giving them absolutes. But for me, I was like, people are so deceived in what they think OnlyFans is, and it's not the truth. And so if I can provide context to give people a well-rounded decision, then of course I would do that. So therefore I don't care about the backlash. I don't care what people say, because I care more about trying to help people, I guess. And so again, that lens came from business of going, I don't care what people think, they're not going to understand it anyways. And so I think that there just needs to be, again, a level of taking emotion out of things to a degree. And sometimes we do have to use our logic brain. And so when it comes to fear of man, I guess let's put this in a really Christian perspective, and perhaps you get like a word of knowledge and you need to go up to someone and give them that word of knowledge. Well, just put your rational brain on and go, this person, I think I'm hearing from God. I hear this. So in kindness, they deserve to know that God's speaking to them, and they deserve to know what God has to say. And so why would I not want to do that in love to someone? And so just being ruthless again with your rationality and go, well, I don't care what people think, because I think that this is the kind thing to do in love, and just do it. And so I think that fear of man is about putting like a rational brain on, operating from a place of love. Again, tuning out the frequencies, tuning out the noise, and sometimes that's internal. And then action. And I think action is the biggest denominator of when it comes to fear of man. And I remember one day when I was like, I guess, learning or understanding that, oh, you can like go up to people and tell them stuff that God like has for them. I was on a walk one day at the beach, and I literally just felt like I was getting these weird like words of knowledge about all these strangers as I'm walking. So I just went up to people. I think on that walk, in like a 20-minute span, I went up to like 8 or 9 people, and I just gave them whatever I felt that God said. And maybe some of it was true, maybe some of it wasn't, maybe I seemed like a crazy person, but I didn't really care, because I was like, oh, I feel like this is what God wants me to do in love. And everything I spoke was kind, it was uplifting, it was edifying, it was encouraging. Nothing was mean. It didn't put these people down. And I just went up to people. I was like, hey, you're probably going to think I'm a freak for this, but I kind of believe in this thing called Jesus, and I feel like he says XYZ. And so by doing that more and more, and just, again, doing an action, it made me care less about the results. And so a big way that I put this, and this is kind of a framework I have for everything, is I can only focus on my input. I can't focus on the output. And so if my input when it comes to fear of man, evangelizing, talking about things that you care about, starting that business, XYZ, I can only focus on doing what I can do. And so what is that? Well, that is hearing a word and speaking that in love, or that is starting the business and just doing what I can with what I've got and just taking small steps, or insert input. The output is actually none of my business. And so if we believe in God, we believe that, okay, well, if this is what you've given me as an input, the output isn't how this person reacts to it. That's actually on God, because God's given me the word. Or the output isn't, will this business be successful? Because God's given me this dream. All I can do is execute it. And then what he does with the output is his business. And so again, I think it's rational brain of going, whatever it is that you're fearing, identifying it, and then putting logic to it, and then taking action on it. And so that really, really helps me, I guess, with like fear of man. And I had another potential point. Sick. And then the last point, which I think is super, super, super important, is where are you getting your validation from? Because if your validation comes from people encouraging you, like online, just say if you post something like, yeah, this is great, and then you start posting about Jesus and like, hey, this is weird, well, then you get your validation from people. That's why you have a fear of man. If you get your validation from someone's reaction to you going up to them and giving them a word of knowledge, well, then that means that your identity is placed in what people think of you. Again, with business, what will people think? Are they going to think that I'm a loser? What if I fail? What if? Well, then again, you're placing your validation and identity in the outcome. And so again, a really great mind shift perspective to have is, well, who gives me my validation and where does my identity come from? And if the only person that validates you is God, and if you understand your identity and what this means of I'm a child of God and he literally is my dad, when you understand that, then you go, well, I don't need validation from actually anything else because God gives me my validation. And so again, they're just my little bite-sized things, and they're whole other things that we can extrapolate on. So if you guys are actually interested in deep diving into them more, let me know. But that's just my very quick snippet soundbite of literally how do you break off fear of man? So just being rational, again, using logic brain, being actionable, and then like where does your validation come from, and thinking about that. And hopefully they're just some ways that you can start to marinate on maybe why you struggle with this, and they're things that you can just go and implement to kind of just not care. And it's great because then you can do super fun things and it ends up always being a positive anyways. So hopefully that's helpful for you guys. And again, a little bit of information and actionables and tangibles and anecdotes from my life of things that I've just done to be able to get rid of caring about what people think in a really positive, healthy way. So thanks, guys.